Darst, R. Matthew, Araz Rafayat, and Alexandros Vardalakis 2020. Banks, Non-Banks, and Lending Standards, Finance and Economics Discussion Series 2020-086. Washington, Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, https://doi.org/10.17016/feds.2020.086. Note, staff working papers in the Finance and Economics Discussion Series FEDS are preliminary materials circulated to stimulate discussion and critical comment. The analysis and conclusions set forth are those of the authors and do not indicate concurrence by other members of the research staff or the Board of Governors. References in publications to the Finance and Economics Discussion Series, other than acknowledgement, should be cleared with the authors to protect the tentative character of these papers. Banks, Non-Banks, and Lending Standards, R. Matthew Darst. Araz Rafayat, Alexandros P. Vardalakis, the 9th of October 2020. Abstract. We study how competition between banks and non-banks affects lending standards. Banks have private information about some borrowers and are subject to capital requirements to mitigate risk-taking incentives from deposit insurance. Non-banks are uninformed and market forces determine their capital structure. We show that lending standards monotonically increase in bank capital requirements. Intuitively, higher capital requirements raise banks' skin in the game and screening out bad projects assures positive expected lending returns. Non-banks enter the market when capital requirements are sufficiently high, but do not cause a deterioration in lending standards. Optimal capital requirements trade off inefficient lending to bad projects under loose standards with inefficient collateral liquidation under tight standards. GEL classification, G01, G21, G28. Keywords: lending standards, credit cycles, asymmetric information, non-banks, regulation. 1. Introduction. Recessions and downturns in business cycles are often preceded by periods of rapid credit growth. A major discussion following the financial crisis of 2007 to 2009 centered on the observation that shadow banks, or more plainly non-bank financial intermediaries, are an important conduit through which credit is intermediated to households and firms. More recently, there is a growing concern whether the rapid growth in risky business lending fueled by non-bank investors' demand for high-yield bonds, leveraged loans, and collateralized loan obligations (CLO), accompanied by loose lending standards, portends the next bust cycle. As an example, private credit from non-bank financial institutions, and in particular private equity funds, to high-risk, middle-market firms had been the fastest-growing portion of the loan market, totaling near $800 billion in lending as of 2018. Market participants have pointed to higher costs from stricter, prudential regulation, as one of the reasons why banks no longer serve this market. In addition, several empirical papers conclude that regulation has been an important factor in the rise of shadow banks after the crisis for shadow banking in mortgages. See Buchik, Matvos, Piskorsky and Seru 2018, and for corporate loans see Irani, Iyer, Meisenzal and Pedro 2020. The narrative that rising capital costs drive banks out of markets into which non-banks enter with lax lending standards lacks a causal mechanism. In particular, does non-bank competition cause an erosion of equilibrium lending standards, or do non-banks enter into loan markets when lending standards are already loose and demand for credit among risky borrowers is high? The goal of this paper is to understand how regulation interacts with competition between bank and non-bank financial intermediaries and how it impacts aggregate lending standards. We present a model of capital regulation and lending standards that builds on Delarisha and Marquez 2006. The model has two types of borrowers, good and bad. Good borrowers have projects with positive net present value (NPV), while bad borrowers have projects with negative NPV but have higher upside conditional on success. On average, a portfolio of both good and bad projects is positive NPV. Banks have private information about borrowers with whom they have existing relationships, but there is another set of borrowers whose projects' quality are unknown. While the mass of known borrowers is fixed, the mass of unknown borrowers can vary, and it represents the level of new demand for credit. Collateral requirements in loan contracts can be used to screen good borrowers from bad borrowers, but liquidating collateral in default is inefficient. Alternatively, loan contracts without collateral requirements pool all borrowers. Thus, banks face an adverse selection problem because funding all projects mixes all unknown borrowers, good and bad, with competing banks' known bad borrowers. Lending standards are defined by two alternative credit regimes. Lending standards are tight when collateral is required and bad borrowers are screened out, and lending standards are loose when all borrowers receive funding without collateral requirements. Banks decide whether to go with the first or the second credit regime given the level of the demand for credit. Intuitively, a higher demand for credit by unknown borrowers mitigates the adverse selection problem because an unknown borrower has a positive NPV project on average. In this framework, lending standards are captured by a threshold for loan demand where banks switch from regime I, tight standards, to regime E, loose standards. All these are standard from Delarisha and Marquez, 2006. We augment this framework in two important ways to examine how capital regulation interacts with non-bank competition to determine lending standards. First, we make the standard assumption that banks raise insured deposits and issue equity. Deposit insurance gives banks the incentive to risk shift and fund bad projects that are negative NPV, but have higher upside conditional on success. To prevent risk shifting, a regulator imposes microprudential capital requirements. See, for example, Cooper and Ross, 1998, Van den Heuvel, 2008, Baganow, 2020. Second, we assume unregulated intermediaries, non-banks, also provide agents with funding for their projects. Non-banks differ from banks in the following ways. Non-banks issue unsecured debt, and a market-based solution is needed to determine their capital structure. We later elaborate on this. And non-banks have no information about any borrowers and treat the entire mass of borrowers as unknown. In this simple framework, we derive the following results. First, perhaps unsurprisingly, non-banks cannot compete with banks when capital requirements are set to just curb the moral hazard problem, that is, when regulation is microprudential in nature. The reason is that banks have both an informational advantage and funding cost advantage due to deposit insurance. Second, increasing capital requirements beyond their microprudential level improves lending standards. The reason is that the higher requirements increase all banks' funding costs, which strengthens each bank's information advantage relative to competitors trying to poach good borrowers through lax standards. We call these requirements, which are above their microprudential level, macroprudential capital requirements, because, as it will become clear, they allow a social planner to trade off inefficient collateral liquidation with inefficiently funding negative NPV projects. Third, stricter macroprudential capital requirements introduce competition from non-banks. The reason is that higher funding costs erode the subsidized deposit insurance provided to banks, which enables non-banks to compete. The fourth and main result of the paper shows that lending standards monotonically improve as macroprudential regulation tightens, and the tightening effect is amplified in presence of non-bank competition. In other words, the economy with non-banks supports a separating credit regime characterized by tight lending standards for a larger threshold value of credit demand. Recall that lending standards are characterized by the threshold for loan demand after which the economy switches from the separating to the pooling regime. The intuition behind this, perhaps counterintuitive, result is as follows. Non-banks can compete more easily in separating contracts because the deposit insurance subsidy and the private information gives a relatively bigger advantage to banks in pooling where negative NPV projects are also funded. This implies that, for intermediate levels of macroprudential requirements, the separating contract is set by non-banks while the pooling contract is set by banks. 2. Hence, the price of the pooling contract increases with stricter macroprudential regulation, while the separating contract is unaffected. It is therefore more difficult for bad borrowers to profitably obtain funds in the pooling regime as the cost of pooling increases relative to separating, and lending standards tighten. On the contrary, in the absence of non-banks, the separating contract offered by banks also becomes more expensive with stricter regulation and, thus, the pooling contract is competitive for lower levels of credit demand. As we establish in the second result described above, lending standards do again tighten with stricter regulation, but less intensely than in the presence of non-banks. Note that this fourth result relies on the fact that non-banks can more easily compete in separating contracts, which is very intuitive once one realizes that banks have a relative advantage in pooling contracts given that non-banks can use collateral to separate good from bad borrowers as efficiently as banks can. If, instead, non-banks could more easily compete in pooling contracts, the result would be reversed and lending standards would deteriorate with stricter macroprudential regulation. Yet, this cannot happen in our framework. Our fifth and final result concerns the optimal macroprudential capital requirement in economies without and with non-banks. We consider a social planner that chooses bank capital requirements trading off the costs and benefits of tight versus loose standards. In particular, tight standards, through screening, reduce the number of negative NPV projects that are funded in equilibrium. However, more overall collateral is needed to screen, which raises the cost of inefficient liquidation. We show that non-bank competition constrains the planner's ability to set macroprudential capital requirements in the sense that the optimal macroprudential capital requirement is never higher when non-banks are present than when they are absent. The reason is that the planner generally favors screening out negative NPV projects, which can be achieved by tightening capital requirements. At the same time, capital requirements do not impact the separating contracts non-banks offer once they can compete, which require more collateral and, thus, imply higher liquidation costs. Hence, the planner would like to induce more screening by raising capital requirements, but cannot do so as effectively when non-banks offer separating contracts. We should note that our model for non-banks can be of independent interest to the literature on financial intermediation and can encompass a wide variety of non-bank financial institutions, such as finance companies, insurance companies, mutual funds, hedge funds, etc. Our theory rests on the fact that non-banks have the incentive to risk shift, but the assets they can invest in are illiquid. Hence, there is a moral hazard problem on the asset choice and potentially run risk on the liabilities. The moral hazard from risk shifting can be addressed by holding equity capital, but critically the type of debt the market imposes on non-banks depends on whether equity is contractable. For example, when equity is contractable, a combination of long-term debt and equity eliminates both run risk and addresses the moral hazard problem similar to Holmstrom and Terral, 1997. Contracting on equity is important because non-banks could issue dividends or repurchase shares after raising debt, reducing their skin in the game, which would encourage risk shifting. In such a situation, a covenant in long-term debt would be triggered, accelerating repayment and allowing creditors to possess the firm in the extreme. Alternatively, if equity is not contractable, then a fragile funding structure of runnable debt restores incentives to prevent risk shifting as non-banks would maintain a sufficient level of equity as in Diamond and Rajan, 2000. Note that the moral hazard and illiquidity problems are also present for banks, but are resolved by two regulatory interventions: deposit insurance and capital requirements. Our results have important implications for the effect that macroprudential policy regimes currently in place across many central banks, such as countercyclical capital buffers, have on lending standards and credit extension. Countercyclical capital buffers, designed to increase regulatory bank capital during an expansion, actually strengthen lending standards not only in financial systems where most lending is concentrated in the regulated banking sector, but also in financial systems where non-banks aggressively compete with banks. In the latter, while activity will emigrate to non-banks and can erode banking profits, the shift in activity is not necessarily the cause of weaker lending standards. Additionally, the model's cross-section prediction is that optimal macroprudential capital requirements should be lower in jurisdictions with strong non-bank competition in lending markets than in places where the banking system is the dominant source of intermediated credit. Related literature. Our paper contributes to the literature on bank lending standards starting with Delarocha and Marquez, 2006. We introduce a moral hazard problem and non-bank competition into this framework. Rux 2004 studies how bank lending standards vary over the business cycle. In his model, average borrower quality generally improves during expansions, creating more bank competition and lower loan prices. This results in less bank screening intensity and lower standards as higher-risk borrowers obtain loans. In our model, changes in lending standards come from the interaction of capital requirements and non-bank competition when average borrower quality is held fixed. Gormley 2014 studies how lender entry influences aggregate credit extension and output when new lenders can cream skim. Banks screen borrowers by investing in a costly technology. In our model, lenders design contracts to separate borrowers, hence new entrants cannot cream skim. 3. Relatedly, Delarisha and Marquez 2004 study the effect of acquiring private information on loan portfolio quality on borrower capture. Inside information essentially gives banks market power, making it difficult for borrowers to obtain financing from outside lenders. More recently, Martinez Mira and Rapullo 2018 use a different framework to study a similar question. In their model, financial institutions make an observable monitoring decision that can affect the probability of a project's success. They show that capital structure impacts both monitoring incentives and the moral hazard problem through costly capital certification. Our paper differs because we focus on the choice of financial institutions to design contracts that screen and separate borrowers, and we do not endogenously derive the emergence of non-banks. Instead, our focus is on how regulation affects the competition between banks and non-banks and how that impacts lending standards. Several recent papers study lending standard dynamics, but none of them consider the effects of regulation and non-bank competition on credit market outcomes. In particular, Fishman, Parker and Straub 2019 use a similar monitoring technology to Martinez Mira and Rapullo 2018 to study how screening intensity dynamically affects the quality of the borrower pool. Farbuti and Condor 2019 study how sentiment affects credit outcomes, where sentiment is modeled as a lender choice to use tests to determine borrower quality. The quality of the borrower pool endogenously fluctuates with standards generating credit cycles. Gorton and Ordonez 2019 and Azrian, Levin and Martin 2018 study how the use of collateral in lending contracts affects information acquisition and the emergence of boom-bust cycles. Finally, our paper is related to the emerging literature on the role of non-bank financial institutions. Donaldson, Piacentino and Thacker 2019 develop a model where banks and non-banks coexist in equilibrium and show that funding cost differences result in different lending strategies, but do not focus on lending standards. Parler, Rajan and Zhu 2020 study the impact of fintech competition in payment services on bank profitability and loan quality when information externalities accrue to banks. Banks are informed relative to fintech entrants as in our model, but they do not consider capital structure differences and endogenous lending standards. Planton 2014 studies optimal liquidity regulation under regulatory arbitrage by banks, while Harris, Opp and Opp 2017 study how different microprudential regulation costs affect non-bank competition in a general equilibrium setting. Luck and Schempp 2014 and Ari, Koch, Derek Perrys and Zakowski 2019 study how the endogenous emergence of banks and non-banks affect financial stability. We contribute to this literature by explicitly examining how capital regulation and non-bank competition affects lending standards, and by proposing a new way to model non-bank financial institution as described above. The rest of the paper is organized as follows. Section 2 presents the model with just banks and establishes how capital requirements affect bank competition and lending standards. Section 3 introduces non-banks and shows the conditions under which they are able to compete with banks by loosening their lending standards. Section 4 shows how lending standards can vary over the cycle in responses to counter-cyclical capital requirements. Section 5 discusses the welfare implications and derives the optimal regulation. All proofs that are not immediately obvious from the text are included in the appendix. 2. Model with banks. This section presents the model and derives the equilibrium when only banks are present. Non-banks are introduced in Section 3. As mentioned, the model builds on the bank lending standards model of Delarisha and Marquez 2006, but features additional frictions to obtain a meaningful distinction between banks and non-banks, and introduces a role for micro and macro prudential capital regulation. 2.1. time, uncertainty, and agents. Consider an economy with two time periods, t equals 0, 1. Time 0 is broken into a three-stage game that is described below where all of the action takes place. For now, there are two types of agents that populate the economy. Later, a third type of agent is introduced called a non-bank. We call the first type of agents entrepreneurs or firms. We refer to the second type as banks. Both firms and banks have a discount factor of 1. Suppose there is a continuum of firms given by the mass 1 plus lambda, each of which has an end of period wealth given by W that is sufficient to meet any collateral requirement. Each firm is endowed with a risky production technology that transforms $1 of input at t equals 0 into a random output at t equals 1. This technology can be terminated early at any point between t equals 0 and t equals 1, yielding xi element of 0, 1. Firms differ in their technology endowment. In particular, a successful good project produces y equals g while bad projects produce y equals b. For simplicity, both projects produce 0 when they fail. In addition, the probability that good-bad firms produce G/B is given by PG/PB, where PG greater than PB. Let the average probability of success be defined by P micro equals alpha PG plus 1 minus alpha PB. Moreover, we assume that the bad project has a higher payoff than the good projects when successful, that is, B greater than G, but they have negative net present value, that is, PGG greater than 1 greater than PBB. Let the fraction of good and bad firms in the economy be given by alpha and 1 minus alpha respectively. The mass of borrowers given by lambda element of 0, infinity, are unknown, that is, none of the banks know the quality of their project, while the mass of borrowers equal to 1 are known, that is, at least one bank knows the quality of their projects. There are n greater than 1 banks that compete for entrepreneurs. Banks are symmetric and each bank knows the quality of a non-overlapping mass of 1n different firms. That is, each firm's quality is known by only one bank. Private information exposes each bank to adverse selection from bad borrowers known only to other banks. Thus, each bank at t equals 0 can either attempt to engage in screening and separate bad borrowers from the rest, or pool all borrowers together exposing itself to adverse selection. As described below, banks can use non-price terms, that is, collateral, to separate good from bad borrowers. There are 3 stages in the game at time 0. In stage 1, banks offer a menu of contracts to unknown borrowers. The contracts are defined by the tuple RJK, CJK, J equals G, B, K equals S, P, where RJK is the face value of the debt for firm J in either separating or pooling equilibrium K. CJK is the corresponding required collateral, which banks can foreclose if projects fail. We use the typical assumption that banks only obtain a fraction of posted collateral upon project failure given by kappa C with kappa less than 1. Hence, collateral foreclosure is inefficient and we will assume that the cost 1 minus kappa is sufficiently high that banks default if the bad state realizes. 4. In stage 2, banks observe the outcome of stage 1 and can offer competitive contracts to their known borrowers. Borrowers choose their preferred contract among those offered by all banks. In stage 3, banks may reject loan applicants. 5. Debts are repaid or collateral is foreclosed, and agents consume at t equals 1. All entrepreneurs are risk neutral and maximize expected profits. Entrepreneurs will consider the loan contract RI, CI, if expected profits are positive, that is, pi, y, minus RI, minus 1 minus pi, c. I is greater than or equal to 0, 4. I equals G, B. 2.2. Banks, risk shifting and microprudential capital requirements. Banks fund the loans to entrepreneurs by raising equity capital and deposits in perfectly elastic markets. As in Allen, Carletti and Marquez 2015, we assume that there is a segmented investor base, such that the owners of banks are willing to inject equity funding, while outside investors are only willing to hold debt instruments. For simplicity, the outside option of the latter is a riskless technology with zero net yield, while the former demand a gross expected return E greater than 1 to supply equity. Equity is long-term and receives payment only at t equals 1 after deposits have been paid in full. On the contrary, deposits are demandable claims which specify an uncontingent gross payment D0 is greater than or equal to 1 at withdrawal. 2.2.1. Deposit insurance. As firm projects are illiquid, that is, SHE less than 1, a coordination failure may induce all depositors to withdraw their deposits early before projects mature at t equals 1. 6. Similar to much of the literature following Diamond and Divig 1983, we resolve the coordination problem by introducing deposit insurance, such that banks can raise fully insured deposits at a cost D0 equals 1, that is, equal to the riskless gross return required by outside investors. Moreover, the deposit insurance premium is imperfectly priced, in other words, it is not a function of each bank's loan portfolio. As a result, deposit funding is insensitive to risk and banks can raise deposits at a gross cost D equals D0 plus IP, where IP is the insurance premium. Because D is not a function of the type of project banks fund, and due to limited liability, banks have an incentive to take excessive risk. The same regulator that insures deposits can eliminate the risk-taking behavior by setting a high enough equity capital requirement, denoted by gamma, such that banks have enough skin in the game. We call these requirements microprudential capital requirements. Below we derive the optimal microprudential capital requirement, denoted by gamma, set at time 0 to prevent banks from risk shifting. Risk shifting occurs when banks use fully insured deposits to make loans to bad, negative NPV firms. Note that deposit insurance is inconsequential when banks finance with 100% equity. We make the following assumption to preclude all equity-financed banks. Assumption 1. E greater than PGG. Under Assumption 1, banks will raise some fraction of funds from deposits with full insurance and may have the incentive to only fund bad projects. 2.2.2. Risk shifting. We restrict attention to good and bad projects payoffs, G and B, that generate the possibility of risk shifting when there are no capital requirements, that is, gamma equals 0. Define by RG the maximum face value, or equivalently, gross loan rate that banks can charge known good borrowers without losing them to competing banks. The gross loan rate offered to bad firms, RB, needs to satisfy the following three conditions. First, it should be individually rational for bad firms to borrow, that is, B is greater than or equal to RB. Second, it should not be individually rational for good types to borrow, that is, RB greater than G. 7. Third, risk shifting should be individually rational for banks, that is, profits should be higher or RB greater than PG divided by PB, RG minus D, plus D. In addition, bad projects have negative NPV, that is, PBRB is less than or equal to PBB less than 1, which in combination with the previous condition yields PGRG minus PG minus PB, D less than 1. Combining the latter two conditions with RB is less than or equal to B and RG is less than or equal to G, we derive the following assumption needed to obtain risk shifting as the only equilibrium when capital requirements, gamma, are 0. Assumption 2. Good and bad firms' project payoffs satisfy G less than 1 plus PG minus PB, D, divided by PG and B greater than PG divided by PB, G minus D, plus D. 2.2.3. Microprudential capital requirements. The bank regulator can set the capital requirement to prevent risk shifting. The regulator knows that B is the maximum gross loan rate bad firms are willing to accept. Thus, it is sufficient to set gamma high enough such that the profits lending to bad firms are lower than the required return of equity, that is, gamma E greater than PB, B minus 1 minus gamma D. Note that banks repay deposits only when the projects succeed because of limited liability. The microprudential capital requirement, gamma, that prevents risk shifting in equilibrium is given by 1 greater than gamma is defined as PB, B minus D, divided by E minus PBD. Under microprudential capital requirements, banks are willing to lend to known good borrowers if the expected profits are higher than the required return on equity, that is, PG RG minus 1 minus gamma D is greater than or equal to gamma E. Hence, the minimum gross loan rate to known good borrowers that makes banks break even under microprudential capital requirements as given by R gamma is defined as gamma E minus PGD divided by PG plus D. 3. The following assumption guarantees that it is rational for good types to borrow under microprudential capital requirements, that is, G greater than R gamma. Assumption 3. PG G minus D divided by E minus PGD greater than PB B minus D divided by E minus PBD. The following proposition summarizes the results of this subsection that relate optimal lending rates under microprudential capital requirements with risk-shifting incentives. Proposition 1. Let project returns satisfy assumptions 1, 2, and 3. In presence of deposit insurance, the microprudential capital requirement that prevents risk shifting is given by 2. 2.3. Equilibrium with banks. Similar to Delarisha and Marquez 2006, we solve the game at t equals 0 by backward induction and focus on pure strategy symmetric equilibria. Stage 3 is not interesting, but necessary to obtain a stable equilibrium. Borrowers cannot coordinate on contracts that provide negative returns to banks because they will be rejected. At stage 2, banks will offer their known good borrowers the contract RG0, which makes them just indifferent to their outside option, the contract that is offered to borrowers at stage 1. Note that the contract offered to known good borrowers does not entail collateral because it is costly for borrowers and banks already know their type. Known bad borrowers will not receive credit from their relationship banks in stage 2 because they have negative NPV projects for which banks make losses, in expectations, under the microprudential capital requirements in 2. Therefore, known bad borrowers will only receive credit in stage 1 if the equilibrium debt contract pools all unknown borrowers into a common contract. We now proceed to solve the game at stage 1 and determine whether a separating or pooling equilibrium ensues. 2.3.1 Separating equilibrium with banks. The first equilibrium concept we construct is the separating screening equilibrium. In particular, banks use collateral in loan contracts to distinguish between good and bad borrowers. Define this contract by RJS, CJS. Banks use a menu of contracts to attract only good borrowers subject to incentive compatibility, IC, and individual rationality constraints, IR. The following IC constraints ensure that the contract designed for good-bad firms does not give higher profits to bad-good firms should they choose to mimic. PG G minus RG minus 1 minus PG, CG is greater than or equal to PG G minus RB minus 1 minus PG CB. PB B minus RB minus 1 minus PB CB is greater than or equal to PBB minus RG minus 1 minus PB CG. The IC constraint for bad types above boils down to their IR constraint. 0 is greater than or equal to PBB minus RG minus 1 minus PB CG. Because they are offered no other contract under microprudential capital requirements. See Proposition 1 above. In addition, perfect competition among banks drives expected profits to 0 on the contract they offer to good borrowers. As a result, the separating loan contract, offered to both G and B borrowers, is determined by the binding IR constraints of bad borrowers and banks, that is, PB B minus Rs minus 1 minus PB Cs equals 0, 4. PG Rs minus 1 minus gamma D plus 1 minus PG max kappa Cs minus 1 minus gamma D 0 equals gamma E. 5. While the IC constraint of good borrowers will be non-binding. Due to limited liability, the second term in 5 cannot be negative. We show in the proof of Proposition 2 that it will be 0 in equilibrium, that is, kappa C S less than 1 minus gamma D, under sufficiently low kappa, which can be as high as 1 for most parametrizations. Consequently, banks' expected profits are not affected by using costly collateral to screen out bad borrowers, leaving the equilibrium contract offered to good borrowers the same at stages 1 and 2. The gross loan rate in the separating allocation is, thus, given by Rs equals R, gamma, in 3. Thus, good borrowers face higher repayment rates in separating allocations due to the capital requirements that curb risk-shifting incentives. The optimal repayment value and collateral requirement is the solution to the IR and zero profit equation system above. The following proposition summarizes the optimal contract in the separating allocation offered by banks in stage 1 of the game at t equals 0. Proposition 2. Under the microprudential capital requirement gamma given by 2 and for sufficiently high foreclosure costs, the loan contract that banks offer is characterized by gross loan rate Rs equals gamma E divided by PG plus 1 minus gamma D and collateral Cs equals PB divided by 1 minus PB, PG, PGB minus gamma E plus 1 minus gamma D PG. We now proceed to derive the condition for a separating equilibrium. A separating allocation is an equilibrium when no bank can offer an alternative contract in which all borrowers are pooled and can make positive profits. Rothschild and Stiglitz, 1976. Define the alternative pooling contract as RP 0. The pooling contract does not use collateral to screen because collateral is costly and the contract must be accepted by all borrowers. The repayment amount must be set low enough to lure good borrowers away from the separating contract. Otherwise, it will not be profitable, in expectations, to banks. In particular, the gross loan rate, RP, must satisfy PG, Y minus RP, greater than PG, Y minus Rs, minus 1 minus PG, Cs, which yields, RP less than Rs plus 1 minus PG PG Cs, 6. In addition, the bank offering the pooling contract has to break even. Given that in pooling allocations, it funds all unknown borrowers and the known bad borrowers other. Banks reject, breaking even requires, equation 7. Conditions 6 and 7 provide the necessary and sufficient conditions for the separating allocation to constitute an equilibrium, equation 8. Equation 8 intuitively states that a separating equilibrium is stable as long as the break-even pooling rate that a deviating bank can offer is higher than the break-even separating rate. Notice that equation 8 links the severity of the adverse selection problem, mass of unknown borrowers, lambda, to the existence of the separating equilibrium. In particular, equilibrium is always separating when all borrowers in the economy are known, lambda right pointing arrow 0. 8. The intuition is that when there are no unknown borrowers, the pooling contract only attracts competitor banks' known bad borrowers with negative NPV projects. Alternatively, as the pool of unknown borrowers grows large, that is, lambda right pointing arrow infinity, the information asymmetry between competing banks becomes essentially irrelevant because all borrowers are effectively unknown to all banks. It may be profitable to deviate from the separating allocation to pooling depending on the value of lambda. More precisely, the equilibrium is a function of lambda when the following condition is satisfied, equation 9. If 9 holds, a stable separating equilibrium exists for lambda below some threshold lambda. Note that condition 9 depends on the average borrower quality among types, alpha. In particular, the equilibrium strategy profile is to never deviate from a separating equilibrium as alpha right pointing arrow 0. Alternatively, deviations are always profitable for alpha right pointing arrow 1 irrespective of the value of lambda. Intuitively, banks always choose to separate borrowers when only bad types exist, alpha right pointing arrow 0, because they essentially extend credit exclusively to negative NPV projects under pooling. By contrast, when only good types exist, separating borrowers is no longer the optimal strategy because collateral requirements are costly and unnecessary. Thus, there will be a threshold proportion of good borrowers in the economy, alpha, above which the mass of unknown borrowers affects the choice between separating and pooling. The following proposition derives the thresholds alpha and lambda and characterizes the stable separating equilibrium. Proposition 3. There exists alpha greater than 0 such that condition 9 holds. The equilibrium pure strategies satisfy the following. 1. If alpha less than alpha, banks offer unknown borrowers the unique separating contract, Rs, Cs. 2. For alpha greater than alpha, there exists 0 less than lambda less than infinity such that banks offer unknown borrowers the unique separating contract, Rs, Cs, when lambda is less than or equal to lambda. 3. There is no separating equilibrium if and only if alpha greater than alpha and lambda greater than lambda. Note that neither known or unknown bad borrowers receive credit in the separating equilibrium. Moreover, known good borrowers receive the contract RGS 0 that makes them just indifferent between the contract with zero collateral and the separating contract offered to unknown borrowers at stage 1 of the game. It is straightforward to show that the loan rate for known good borrowers is strictly greater than the loan in the separating contract. In fact, the difference in the repayment amount represents the economic rent that banks extract from their known good borrowers and is given by Equation 10. 2.3.2. Pooling equilibrium with banks. The pooling allocation is trivially determined by the same conditions that prevent the existence of the separating allocation. In particular, in the pooling equilibrium, banks offer all firms the same contract defined by the break-even condition 7, set to equality, Equation 11. Proposition 4. If condition 9 holds, then for lambda greater than lambda, the unique equilibrium pure strategy profile is the pooling allocation given by RP 0. When condition 8 fails, there is a pooling contract that good types prefer to the zero profit separating contract. Hence, any bank that chooses to deviate and offer the pooling contract will make positive expected profits. As a result, the separating allocation cannot exist. Moreover, the pooling strategy is a stable equilibrium itself. To see this, assume that a bank decides to deviate from the pooling contract and offer contract ROO, COO, which is preferred by good borrowers. That is, ROO plus 1 minus pi g, COO less than RP, but not by bad borrowers, that is, ROO plus 1 minus pi b, COO greater than RP. Then, all good borrowers will choose to borrow from that bank, while all the other banks offering the pooling contract will attract only bad borrowers. The fact that all the contracts offered at stage 1 of the game are observable by all banks at stage 2 suffices to prevent such cream skimming from being a profitable deviation in equilibrium. If the cream skimming contract is offered by one bank, then all other banks will observe it and decline to lend at the final stage, which means that both good and bad borrowers will coordinate on the cream skimming contract. In turn, this would make the deviation unprofitable because the cream skimming contract requires an above-average borrower quality to be viable, which is impossible as it cannot separate good from bad borrowers. That is, COO less than Cs given by 8. Taking all these out of equilibrium paths into consideration, all banks will offer the pooling contract RP 0. Because of the sharing rule, one bank ends up lending to all unknown borrowers and all but one divided by n bad known borrowers through a pooling contract, while it offers its good known borrowers the contract RGP 0 with RGP just below RP in order to attract them. Similarly, the other banks offer RGP to their known good borrowers, but do not lend through a pooling contract in the final stage. The pooling equilibrium is unique and stable, and the pooling loan rate is given by 11. 9. 2.3.3. Numerical example. Before moving to the model with non-banks, we show the main results up to this point using a numerical example. We choose the following parameters values: PG equals 0.7, PB equals 0.2, G equals 1.6, B equals 2.4, E equals 1.8, D equals 1, alpha equals 0.95, N equals 10, kappa equals 0.9, which satisfy assumptions 1 to 3. Then, the microprudential capital requirement in Proposition 1 is equal to gamma equals 0.15, while the separating contract in Proposition 2 is Rs, Cs equals 1.235, 0.241, implying an effective rate of Rs plus 1 minus pi g, divided by pi g Cs equals 1.339. The pooling rate for lambda equals 0 and lambda right pointing arrow infinity are equal to 2.2 and 1.2, respectively. Hence, a pooling equilibrium exists for lambda higher than the threshold in Proposition 3, which is equal to lambda equals 0.129. In other words, an increase in loan demand or about 13% stemming from new borrowers of unknown quality suffices to induce banks to loosen their lending standards. Finally, note that our parameterization implies alpha equals 0.704 less than alpha, otherwise, from Proposition 3, only a separating equilibrium would exist. 3. Model with banks and non-banks. This section introduces non-bank financial intermediaries and shows how competition between banks and non-banks affects lending standards under microprudential capital regulation. We assume there are a large number of competitive non-banks, which can raise debt from the same outside investors that banks raise deposits at expected cost D0 equals 1 and can also raise equity capital at the same cost, E, as banks. Yet, non-banks do not have private information about any borrowers and treat the whole population of firms 1 plus lambda as unknown. This assumption captures the fact that banks are the incumbent institutions with existing relationships with some borrowers, while non-banks are the entrants without prior information. Banks and non-banks are quite similar at the core aside from the information advantage of the former. As already mentioned, the same moral hazard and run risk problems that were present for banks are also present for non-banks. The way they are resolved, however, is different. Resolving these issues for non-banks may seem as a daunting task involving a lot of institutional details. There is a large variety of non-banks financial institutions including finance companies, broker-dealers, special purpose vehicles, open-ended mutual funds, closed-ended mutual funds, private equity funds, hedge funds, insurance companies among others. The capital structure of these institutions, central to our analysis, differs as some engage in more maturity transformation than others. We present a theory of non-bank capital that can be applied to the diverse non-bank financial institutions mentioned above. The theory is based on the possibility of risk shifting and loan illiquidity, and it predicts a market-determined capital structure and equity capital for non-banks. Equity capital is important such that non-banks have enough skin in the game to prevent them from engaging in risk shifting. There is not new. But, depending on whether non-bank equity capital is contractible or not, it will interact with non-bank liabilities differently to jointly resolve the moral hazard and run risk problems. We consider the two cases separately and show how equity contractibility governs the runnability of non-banks' liabilities in the presence of moral hazard. If the level of non-bank equity is contractible, then long-term debt can jointly eliminate the possibility of a run and address risk shifting by mandating a level of equity capital as a covenant in the debt contract. Why does the contractibility of equity matter? The reason is that non-banks can distribute dividends or repurchase shares after they have received the funds from debt holders, so they may not have enough skin in the game to be discouraged from risk shifting. If non-banks choose to operate with a level of equity less than what is required to discourage risk shifting, the covenant would be violated and the debt holder could seize the firm in the extreme, which would act as a deterrent. The minimum level of equity that long-term debt holders would require non-banks to maintain is, then, given by Equation 12. Where DNB greater than 1 is the interest rate on non-bank debt, which will depend on the investment strategy of non-banks in equilibrium and will incorporate a default premium. If the equity choice is not contractible, then long-term debt is not a viable solution. In this case, a fragile funding structure consisting of runnable debt can restore incentives and non-banks would voluntarily maintain a level of equity that suffices to signal that they have enough skin in the game to deter them from risk shifting. For simplicity, assume that debt holders are promised a gross interest rate greater or equal to 1 if they withdraw early, and an interest rate greater than 1 if they withdraw late, thus compensating them for credit risk. This is essentially a Diamond and Divig 1983 contract accounting for the possibility of non-bank default. Given that equity capital is observable, a drop below the required level would immediately induce debt holders to withdraw early and a run would ensue. Because equity is worthless in a run, non-banks would voluntarily maintain the required level of capital. The type of run described above is driven by bad fundamentals due to risk shifting. See, for example, Jacqueline and Bhattacharya, 1988, and Allen and Gale, 1998. As expected, there can be other type of runs driven by the type of coordination failure described in Diamond-Divig. In order to simplify the analysis, we make a technical assumption that eliminates the possibility of such panic-based runs. 10. In particular, we assume that the liquidation value Xi is high enough to cover early withdrawals by all debt holders. Because their debt would be risk-free in the short run and because debt holders are risk-neutral, the gross interest rate for early withdrawals can be set equal to their outside option, that is, equal to 1. Then, the level of equity, gamma NB0, that non-banks need to hold would need to satisfy the following two conditions. Equation 13. Equation 14. Where DNB is the gross interest rate for late withdrawals. Condition 13 guarantees that there will be no risk shifting in equilibrium, while condition 14 guarantees that there will be no panic-based runs. Combining the two and realizing that gamma NB0 takes its lowest value for DNB0 equals D0 PB, leads to the following assumption for the liquidation value. Assumption 4. The liquidation value xi is higher than xi equals E minus PBBE minus 1 less than 1. The theory of the non-bank capital structure described above combines elements of existing theories with frictions that characterize all financial institutions, namely risk shifting due to the unobservability, non-contractibility of the lending choice and instability due to run risk. If equity is contractible, similar to Holmstrom and Terral, 1997, then long-term debt is the solution. Otherwise, a fragile funding structure can induce the discipline needed to deter moral hazard and run risk in equilibrium, given assumption 4, similar to Diamond and Rajan, 2000. Hence, our theory can be applied to the various diverse non-bank financial institutions that have either stable or runnable liabilities. Moreover, the market-based non-bank equity capital will be the same for both types of institutions given the absence of panic-based runs for the latter, that is, gamma NB equals gamma NB0 and DNB equals DNB0. The following proposition summarizes these results. Proposition 5. The capital structure of non-banks consists of equity and long-term debt if the equity choice is contractible, and of equity and demandable risky debt otherwise. Given assumption 4, the level of equity is the same in both cases for the same loan portfolio and is given by 12, where DNB is the repayment amount on long-term debt or the amount due for late withdrawals on demandable debt. A direct corollary of propositions 1 and 5 is that the market-based equity ratio for non-banks is lower than the microprudential capital requirement for banks as long as DNB greater than D. The cost of debt for non-banks incorporates a default premium, while the effective cost of deposits incorporates an insurance premium set by the regulator. For unpriced deposit insurance, that is, for insurance premium lower than the endogenously determined default premium, gamma NB less than gamma. In other words, non-banks can take more leverage than banks, but need to pay a higher interest rate for their debt than what banks pay for deposits. This result has implications for the weighted average cost of capital of non-banks and their ability to compete with banks. We now turn to the loan portfolio choice of non-banks and whether they can compete by offering a separating or pooling contract. 3.1 Separating equilibrium with non-banks. Can non-banks offer a separating contract to borrowers at least as attractive as the contract offered by banks? Recall that the terms of the separating contract banks offer, Rs, Cs, are given in Proposition 2. For this contract, the interest rate that outside investors will require to provide debt to non-bank, while breaking even, recall they require D0 equals 1 in expectation, is Equation 15. Then, the market-based non-bank capital for a separating loan portfolio, gamma, S. NB is given by substituting 15 in 12. Moreover, using 15 and D equals 1 plus IP, we can derive the fair insurance premium equating the expected cost of non-bank debt and bank deposits for separating contracts, Equation 16. As long as the insurance premium is lower than IPFS, DNBS greater than D and gamma NBS less than gamma. Without loss of generality and for simplicity, we will assume that IP equals 0. It is profitable for non-banks to participate and compete with banks and offer the separating contract to screen borrowers if PGRs minus 1 minus gamma NBS DNBS greater than gamma NBSE. Substituting Rs from Proposition 2, we obtain the necessary condition for non-banks to compete with banks in separating allocation. Equation 17. The left-hand side of 17 is the advantage that non-banks have from lower equity cost. The right-hand side is the non-bank disadvantage from higher debt financing costs.